Thank you so much, Joshua and Small, and everybody for your questions. I think it was a lot to go through in 50 minutes, so I do hope that you get to discuss a little bit more during the breaks. But first, we're going to go on to our next speaker. He'll be touching upon something that's quite complementary to what Joshua and Small discussed. So our next presenter is Shalaleh Rismani, who's pursuing her PhD in electrical and computer engineering at McGill University. And she's supervised by Professor and Mila Associate Member Ajin Moon. Shalaleh is the co-director and a design researcher at the Open Robo Ethics Institute, and also a member of the Responsible Autonomy and Intelligent Systems Ethics Lab. So our current research focuses on how we measure and evaluate the adherence of AI systems to AI ethic principles, which ties in perfectly with some of the topics that were raised upon during Joshua's presentation. So today she's joining us virtually to discuss operationalizing the safe development of AI systems. So Shalaleh, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sophie. Just 1 second. Okay, I hope, I'm not sure. Okay.
Yes, you're all good.
Okay.
We see you.
I'm good. Okay, sounds good. You see my screen? Okay, great. Let me see if just 1 second. Oh. Okay, so I don't know what happened with my screen there. Okay. Okay, cool. Can you see my screen now?
Yep, we're all good, Shalaleh.
Okay, perfect. Great. So thank you so much for being here. Good morning, and my name is Shalaleh. I'm a PhD candidate at the RAISE Lab at McGill University and at Mila. And my background is in mechatronics and biomedical engineering, where I worked on safety critical systems such as surgical tools. Today, I will share a brief summary of my PhD research on operationalizing the safe development of AI systems. So safety is a central concept in engineering, and by necessity, it's a critical part of many technological innovations and breakthroughs, such as commercialization of electricity and development of medical devices and aviation, as mentioned. If we take a brief look at history of safety in these three industries, we can see that operationalizing safety practices can take a long time. And it's important to recognize that safety science and engineering in these industries has really developed over the last 100 years, and there's a lot that we can learn from it. So for example, if you can look at this one of the timelines that I have here, for commercial electricity, the first commercial electrical system was created in 1882, and personal protective equipment were officially brought in and mandated in around 2000. So that's a long time to bring in safety measures, and that's something that we're just very much at the beginning of for AI systems. So considering this rich history of safety engineering and its success in developing safer systems across a variety of complex technologies and applications, the overarching research question that I ask in my PhD is how can we use concepts and frameworks from safety engineering in responsible development of AI systems? And one thing that's important to note is that safety engineering concepts and tools are primarily applied for safety critical systems traditionally. So what is a safety critical system? Safety critical systems are systems whose failure could result in loss of life or significant property damage or damage to the environment. So when a failure of an AI system leads to any of these identified losses in this original definition, we could categorize that system as safety critical easily. And however, it's noteworthy that many of the potential harms of AI system, for example, manipulation of users or loss of autonomy that has already been recognized, do not fall under this definition of safety critical system. So this brings us to the question of what is a safety critical AI system and what types of harms or losses need to be considered as safety critical for AI systems. So to answer this question, my collaborators and I examined the existing conversation about harms from algorithmic systems in the academic community. And our research questions include what harms are described in previous research on algorithmic systems, how are these harms framed in terms of their impact across micro, meso, and macro levels of society, and what social dynamics and hierarchies do researchers of algorithmic systems implicate in their description of harms. So uh, through a systematic review of multidisciplinary computing research, we developed a taxonomy of socio-technical harms that can be applied across a wide range of technological types and contexts. So socio-technical harm are the adverse lived experiences resulting from a system's deployment and operation in the world. So we often just say harm, but the choice to characterize harms from algorithmic systems as socio-technical is purposeful. Because we want to pay attention to the fact that we cannot separate technologies and our experiences of harm from social and cultural dynamics. So from this systematic review that we've done, we've come up with 5 major categories of harm, each of which have subcategories and definitions. So the full table is quite comprehensive and it's challenging to present in this slide, but I'm happy to share that after. So here's a shorter version. So first category is a category of allocative harms, which is about how resources are distributed. This includes opportunity laws and economic laws. The second category is quality of service harms, which is about the disparate experiences of using technology based on one's identity. So for example, if somebody has to work harder to get the same service from a device, then that's a form of increased labor, which is a quality of service harm. Another category is representational harm, which is probably one of the most discussed types of harm, and this concerns how people are represented and what choices they have in what constitutes those representations. The fourth category is social systems harm, which looks at the downstream community and social impacts. These are larger scale harms and at macro scale harms, such as information harm or macro socioeconomic harms. And finally, we have interpersonal harms, which look at more intimate experience of harm, such as technology-facilitated violence or mental health issues. So from this review, we could clearly see that harms from algorithmic systems, which includes AI systems, go well beyond the loss and harms outlined in this original definition of safety critical systems, which were loss of life, significant property damage, or damage to environment. And so when we're designing a safe AI system, we need to really broaden our definition of what we mean by safety critical, and we need to consider and address these emerging and expanded taxonomies of socio-technical harms. So this leads me to another research question that we've been pursuing with my collaborators, and which is that considering the expanded scope of harms for AI systems, we were interested in understanding whether individuals and experts who have been analyzing ML systems and AI systems for social and ethical risks. So I'm calling these individuals ethical AI practitioners or responsible AI practitioners. We were interested in their perspectives towards use of safety engineering framework for identifying these more expanded socio-technical harms in the process of developing AI systems. So we specifically focus on 2 research questions. We want to first understand how are these experts and practitioners currently identifying and assessing social and ethical risks, and what are their perspectives towards using safety engineering frameworks. And we use the phrase social ethical risk to broadly frame the adverse social and ethical implications of ML and AI systems on user, society, and environment. So for this study, we conducted expert interviews with these experts, and we focused on 2 complementary safety engineering frameworks. One of them is failure modes and effect analysis, which is a traditional engineering risk assessment practice developed in the 1960s. FMEA takes an analytic reduction approach and examines how different functions of a system and functions of the components of the system could potentially fail, and what is the effect of that failure, what is the cause of it, and how it could be controlled. On the other hand, system theoretic process analysis is a relatively newer type of hazard analysis tool. It was developed in 2011 by Nancy Levison and her colleagues at MIT. And the idea behind developing this approach was to address some of the shortcomings of techniques such as FMEA. FMEA takes a system theoretic perspective and maps elements of a system and their interactions and examines potential hazards, which are sources of harm. So in analytic reduction, we need the user to sort of imagine the interaction between components, but when we're using SDPA, by modeling the system level, we can observe emergent phenomenon and emergent harm from looking at the component interactions. So in our interviews, we started by asking the experts about their current practices that they do for a safe and responsible development of AI. And then we introduced them to FMEA and SDPA by describing the methods and also giving an example, and then got their feedback about their initial impressions of these techniques and whether they see these techniques would be applicable for ML systems and understanding of socio-technical harms. And then we got them to walk through and try to apply actually these frameworks to an ML system that they were familiar with and see get their response after as well. We conducted reflexive thematic analysis on the interview transcripts, and I'm happy to share more about that later. But basically, experts were able to successfully walk through both of the frameworks for application of ML systems. Here's we don't have a lot of time, but here's a brief illustration of an FMEA application on a predictive algorithm used in criminal justice system, where you can see how one of the participants had gone through the function, the failure mode, the effect, cause, and control, and also scored these different elements. Here's also another high-level illustration of an SDPA analysis on the same type of an algorithm. And here the experts were asked to actually map out the different parts of the system through what's called the control diagram and look at the interactions between the different elements of the system, which include the decision maker, the algorithm, and also the individual that's on trial. And then the unsafe elements could be understood from looking at what could go wrong with these interactions. So the key takeaways from this study were that current practices that are being done are done at ad hoc basis and they're not systematic. And the advantage of safety engineering frameworks is that they could provide a well-defined and structured process for responsible and safe development of AI. This structure can serve as a communicative tool between different experts who are asked to conduct these types of assessments at different stages of the development pipeline, and also it can help establish accountability with upcoming policies and regulations. So this leads me to the final research question that I've been more recently exploring and sort of currently working on more as well, which is how can safety engineering frameworks be conducted along the AI development pipeline for identifying socio-technical harms? And we're pursuing this because we from that second study, we observed that there is a positive potential for applicability of safety engineering frameworks. And we wanted to see how that would work and how could we potentially improve these frameworks, and do we even need to improve them? So we focus on the application of FMEA and SDPA again at 3 stages of the ML and AI development and deployment pipeline here. So we look at 3 stages of data processing for creating a training data set, how we integrate an ML model with other ML or non-ML algorithms and models in an ML product. And finally, the third scope was a use of the end use of the ML product by the user group. So scoping such an analysis, scoping the failure and hazard analysis overall is a non-trivial task, because if you choose the wrong scope or a scope that is not critical, then you would be wasting a lot of time. So we want to make sure that we are scoping at the right level to be able to find the hazards and failures that are key. So we selected these 3 scopes based on some of the existing literature and based on the interviews and how the experts selected scopes when they applied these frameworks on the systems that they were walking through. So we selected these scopes based on that, and also we chose this scope based on the most amount of publicly available and shareable information about the elements involved. And we conducted FMEA and SDPA on a case study which involved the real-world use of text-to-image demos by professional visual artists in their creative practice. And so, as we have discussed, is that there's been a significant improvement in the performance of these generative models, including text-to-image models. However, there is they are complex, and we don't necessarily fully understand how they function in all dimensions. So this does make it challenging to identify potential failures and hazards. However, obviously, the applications of these systems is not stopping. They're still being very much considered across many use cases. And so what safety engineering analysis can allow us to do is to look beyond the single complex model and discover potential failures and hazards by investigating the processes that are part of the development and deployment of these models. Obviously, looking at the model itself is also very valuable, but we think considering the limitations that we might have at this moment for understanding the model, we can still learn a lot from looking at processes that are involved along development and deployment. And so we're using this case study as sort of an empirical examination of that. So overall, we conducted 3 SDP analysis and 3 FME analysis, 2 per scope. So we had 3 scopes. Overall, we had 6 different analyses. Unfortunately, I won't have time to share the details of each analysis, but here are some of the key takeaways. So we were able to systematically identify over 50 potential hazards and failures for each framework across the 3 different scopes without having any details or assumptions about the type of model used in the T2I demo. This was a preliminary analysis. If we were to do a much more comprehensive analysis, I'm sure we would find more than 50. And so this could be a really good starting point for companies to try to address some of these. And then systematically analyzing the 3 scopes along the ML development pipeline can allow practitioners to go beyond one model and focus on really process interaction and build a safer system overall. And we were able to identify hazards and failures that could present socio-technical harms without making really any changes to the original safety frameworks. So we hope that the lessons learned from our analysis can guide practitioners in conducting these types of systematic analysis and look beyond one model in a practical setting and really look at how these models will play out in production use cases. And finally, based on our findings from these 3 projects, we believe that safety engineering principles and methods can effectively inform responsible safe AI development. We can learn from 100 years of safety engineering and really improve these tools instead of trying to create completely new tools for AI systems. We do need to consider new types of socio-technical harms when we're designing and defining safe AI systems. And we believe the safety engineering framework provide a good start and a systematic approach. However, further empirical research is necessary. One other final point I want to make sure that I say is that fostering a culture that values safety is extremely critical as part of implementing these frameworks. So if your company and the whole industry does not have safety culture, then practically it will be very difficult to implement these types of frameworks. So I want to thank you for listening, and I want to thank my advisor, Dr. Ajahn Moon, and my collaborators at Mila, McGill at Google for these projects, and I'm happy to take any questions if there's any time.
Thank you so much, Shalaleh. Do we have any questions? We have time for one, if anybody would like to come up and ask. No? All right. So Shalaleh, thanks for sharing your research with us, especially in a context where the complexity of predicting long-term impacts and outcomes of AI is taking center stage. So this morning was a lot to take in. I'd like to invite you all to take a little coffee break and go chat about the talks and let that sink in. We'll be back in about 15 minutes to start off our second part of the morning. Thank you.